My own father told me I'd never see a dime of his wealth. My stepmother laughed in my face. For years, I believed them. But then I walked into a lawyer's office, and one single sentence changed everything. This is my story. And if you're watching right now, wondering if your family's rejection means you're worth less, this video is for you. Make sure you watch all the way to the end because the twist in my story might just be the thing that changes how you see yourself. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was just 8 years old when my mother got sick. I remember that year so clearly. The way the house felt different, quieter, sadder. My father was there, but he wasn't really there, you know? He was scared. I was scared too, but I was just a kid trying to understand why my mom couldn't play with me anymore. Then one day, she was gone. The funeral was gray and cold, and I remember standing there in a dress that itched my skin, wondering if I'd done something wrong. If maybe she left because of me. My father changed after that. He became this distant man I didn't really recognize. He stopped asking me about school. He stopped coming to my games. He'd come home from work and just sit in his study with the door closed. I'd bring him pictures I made, and he'd barely look up. It hurt in a way I couldn't explain to anyone because I was still grieving my mother. And now I was losing my father too, even though he was still breathing, still living in the same house as me. About 2 years later, my father brought someone home. Her name was Lorraine. She was beautiful and confident, and she smiled a lot. But something about that smile never reached her eyes when she looked at me. I remember my father telling me they were getting married, and I thought maybe things would get better. Maybe he'd be happy again. Maybe he'd remember he had a daughter. I was 10 years old, and I still believed in that kind of magic, but things didn't get better. They got worse. Lorraine had her own daughter, and suddenly our house was split into two. There was Lorraine's side, and then there was me. My father would give her daughter things, clothes, money, attention, and when I asked for help with homework or permission to do something with friends, he'd just say he was tired. He was always tired, but he never seemed tired when Lorraine needed him to help with something. I remember one night, I was maybe 12, and I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I was supposed to be asleep upstairs, but I'd come down for water. My father was saying something about his will, about making sure his daughter was taken care of, and Lorraine just laughed. She said, "Why would you give anything to that girl? She's not even really your responsibility anymore. I mean, she has a mother's family, doesn't she?" My father didn't argue. He just went quiet. That silence said everything. A few weeks later, my father called me into his study. It was rare for him to want to talk to me alone, so my heart was actually hopeful. Maybe this was it. Maybe he was going to tell me he loved me and that everything would be different. Instead, he looked at me with this cold expression and said, "I want you to understand something. When I'm gone, you won't inherit anything from this house or my business. Nothing. Lorraine and her daughter will be taken care of, but not you. You need to understand that now so you're not disappointed later." I was 12 years old. I didn't even fully understand what inheritance meant, but I understood rejection. I understood that my own father had decided I wasn't worth protecting. I asked him why. I remember my voice shaking. And he just said, "Because you're strong enough to make it on your own. Lorraine's daughter needs help. You don't." It wasn't a compliment. It felt like a curse. It felt like he was saying I didn't matter enough to matter to him. After that day, everything became about survival for me. I realized I couldn't depend on my father. I couldn't depend on this house or this family to give me anything. So I started working when I was 13, babysitting, doing yard work, whatever I could do to earn money. I worked through high school. While other kids were worrying about prom and college applications, I was working 2 jobs and trying to keep my grades up so I could get scholarships. Because I knew that education was the only inheritance I could give myself. My stepmother made it worse. She'd make comments about how much I ate, how I was taking up space in the house, how I should probably get my own apartment since I seemed to think I was grown anyway. She'd exclude me from family dinners when my father wasn't around. She'd give her daughter my things without asking. But the worst part wasn't the cruelty. It was my father's silence. He knew what was happening and he didn't stop it. His silence was like another rejection, another confirmation that I didn't matter. High school was lonely. I had friends, but I couldn't really connect with them because our lives were so different. They'd talk about their parents paying for college, about family vacations and trust funds, and I'd just smile and change the subject. I was already working, already planning how I'd survive without any family help. I was already building walls around my heart. I got into college on a full scholarship. I remember calling my father to tell him, waiting for him to say he was proud. He said, "That's good. Make sure you don't mess it up." That's all. Not congratulations, not I'm proud, just don't mess it up. Those words stayed with me for years. Every time I did something good, I heard them. Every achievement felt hollow because I was still trying to prove something to a man who had already decided I wasn't worth investing in. College was transformative. I started meeting people who came from nothing and built everything. I met professors who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. I started to understand that my father's rejection had nothing to do with my worth. He was a broken man grieving my mother, and he'd chosen to push me away instead of holding me close. But understanding that didn't make it hurt less. It just made me sad for him. I graduated with honors. I got a good job. I moved into my own apartment. I started building a life that was completely mine, separate from my family. I didn't call my father much. He didn't call me. There was this empty space between us that neither of us seemed to know how to cross. I dated, I got promoted, I bought furniture and decorated my place and made a home for myself. The words, "You'll never inherit anything," were still there, buried deep, but I'd learned to live around them. By the time I was 30, I'd built something real. Not a fortune, but stability, security, a sense of purpose. I wasn't rich by any means, but I had enough. More importantly, I had earned it myself. Every single thing I had, I'd worked for. There was a strange kind of pride in that, even if I didn't always acknowledge it. Then one Tuesday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a lawyer's office. The woman on the phone said my father had passed away. I felt this strange sensation in my chest. Sadness mixed with something else I couldn't name. We hadn't been close, but he was still my father. He was still the man who created me, even if he'd spent so much of our relationship rejecting me. The woman told me there was a will and that my father's lawyer wanted to meet with me as soon as possible. I asked her what it was about, and she said the lawyer needed to speak with me in person. That's when my anxiety really kicked in. I assumed it was about money, that I'd be left with some debt or responsibility from his estate. I figured Lorraine had probably contested the will or something, and I was being pulled into family drama I didn't want to be part of. I took an afternoon off work and drove to the lawyer's office. It was in a tall building downtown, the kind of place that makes you feel small. The lawyer was a black man, maybe in his 60s, with kind eyes and gray hair. He shook my hand and asked me to sit down. Then he just looked at me for a moment, and I felt like he was seeing something in me. He opened a file and said, "Your father left explicit instructions that I speak with you before anyone else. Before his wife, before her daughter, before anyone." He slid some papers across the desk toward me. "Your father's entire estate, his business, his investment accounts, his real estate, everything, has been left to you. Not in trust, not with conditions, completely to you." I think I stopped breathing. I literally couldn't process what he was saying. I kept asking him to repeat it. And each time he did, it sounded just as impossible as the first time. My father, the man who told me I'd never inherit anything, had left me everything. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But then the lawyer said something that changed how I understood my entire life. He said, "Your father wrote a letter. He wanted me to read it to you." The lawyer put on his glasses and opened an envelope, and he read my father's words. Words that he'd written just before he died, knowing he didn't have much time left. My father wrote about how much he loved my mother, about how when she died, he broke in a way he didn't know how to fix. He wrote about how he pushed me away because he couldn't bear to look at me without seeing her. He said that was wrong. He said he knew it was wrong even as he was doing it. He wrote that he watched me grow up, work hard, and build a life without him, and he was so proud that he couldn't even breathe sometimes. He wrote about Lorraine. He said he married her because he was lonely and broken, and she filled a space. But he also said he realized too late that she was poisoning his mind, making him believe things about me that weren't true. He wrote that he tested me in the cruelest way by saying I'd never inherit anything. He wanted to see if I'd become bitter or if I'd become strong. He said I chose strength. He said I became the person he couldn't be. He wrote that he was leaving everything to me not because I needed it, but because he wanted me to know that his rejection was never about my worth. It was about his weakness. It was about his inability to process his own grief. And that by the time he understood that, it felt too late to fix it. So he was fixing it the only way he knew how, by making sure that the world would know I was his priority, even if he hadn't been mine. I was crying by the time the lawyer finished reading. I was shaking. Everything I'd built in my mind, all the stories I'd told myself about why I wasn't good enough, about why my father had chosen not to love me, all of it just crumbled. He had loved me. He was just broken in a way that kept him from showing it. And somehow knowing that didn't make the past hurt any less, but it made it make sense. The lawyer also told me that my stepmother was contesting the will. She was angry and she was going to fight. But he said my father had been very clear and very specific. He'd documented everything. He'd even video recorded a statement explaining his reasoning. There wasn't much she could do. I asked the lawyer why my father didn't just tell me this, why he had to wait until he was dead to let me know he loved me and that he was proud. The lawyer said, "Sometimes people are too broken to speak their truth while they're living. Sometimes they need to leave it behind them, hoping that someone will understand." It wasn't a satisfying answer, but it was honest. When I left that office, I felt different. Not happy. I wasn't happy. I was sad for all the years I could have had with my father if he'd just been honest about his pain. I was angry that he'd put me through that rejection when all I'd ever wanted was his love, but I was also somehow at peace, because I finally understood that his rejection had been about him, not about me, and I finally had permission to stop trying to earn love from someone who was too broken to give it. The inheritance was substantial. I won't lie and say the money didn't change things. It did, but not in the way Lorraine expected or in the way I would have wanted at 8 years old. The money was just money. What mattered more was what came with it, the understanding that my father had seen me, really seen me, and that he'd recognized my strength even when he couldn't acknowledge it to my face. I used some of the money to go to therapy, real therapy, not just talking to friends. I worked through the pain of my childhood. I grieved the relationship I never got to have with my father. I processed the rejection and the confusion and the hurt, and I learned that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about understanding that other people's limitations don't define your worth. I also used the money to help people. I started a scholarship fund for kids whose families couldn't support their education. I wanted other kids to know that even if their families failed them, there were other ways forward. There were people who believed in them, and I wanted to be that person. Looking back now, I realize that the inheritance my father finally gave me wasn't really the money or the business or the property. The real inheritance was understanding. It was the knowledge that I had always been enough, not because of what I did, not because of how hard I worked, not because I earned it somehow, but because I was worthy of love and support just for existing. That's something I'd spent my whole life trying to prove to a man who was too broken to receive it when I should have been giving it to myself. My stepmother did contest the will. She tried to claim that my father wasn't in his right mind, that he'd been influenced, that I'd somehow manipulated him. But she had no evidence. My father had been very clear in his documentation, and after months of legal battles that she ultimately lost, she had to accept that she was getting nothing. I won't say I felt satisfied by that. I mostly felt sad for her because her greed and her cruelty had cost her everything, but I also felt relieved that she couldn't hurt me anymore. So, what's the point of telling you all of this? Why am I sharing my pain with you? because I want you to understand something really important. If someone in your life, especially someone who's supposed to love you unconditionally, has made you feel small or unworthy or like you'll never be good enough, I want you to know that that says nothing about you. It says everything about them and their limitations. My father couldn't love me the way I needed to be loved while he was alive, and that was his tragedy, not mine. I didn't become less valuable because he couldn't see my value. I didn't become unworthy because he chose to reject me. I was always enough. I just had to learn to believe that for myself. And here's what I wish I'd known sooner. You don't need anyone's inheritance, whether that's money or approval or validation, to build a meaningful life. You already have everything you need inside of you. You have strength, you have resilience, you have the ability to create something beautiful from the broken pieces of your story. If you're like I was, working multiple jobs to survive, trying to prove your worth to people who've already made up their minds about you, I want you to know that your hard work isn't wasted. It's building something real. It's building character. It's building a life that's authentically yours, not something handed to you or something you owe to anyone else. The money from my father helped, sure. It made my life easier in practical ways. But the person I became, the strength I developed, the ability to survive and thrive without depending on my family, that came from me, and that's worth more than any inheritance. I'm telling you this story because I believe someone watching right now needs to hear it. Maybe you're in a toxic family situation. Maybe you're being told you're not good enough. Maybe you're working so hard just to survive and you're wondering if it's worth it. I'm here to tell you that it is. Your life is worth it. Your dreams are worth it. And you are worthy of love and support, even if the people closest to you can't see that. Before you leave this video, I need you to do something for me. I need you to write down one thing that you believe about yourself because someone else told you to believe it. Maybe it's that you're not smart enough, or not talented enough, or not worthy of success. Write it down. And then I want you to recognize that belief for what it is, someone else's limitation projected onto you. That's not the truth about who you are. That's just a story someone told you, and it's time to stop believing it. If this video helped you in any way, if you see yourself in my story, please hit that like button. Share your story in the comments below. Let other people know that they're not alone in feeling rejected or unworthy. Because when we share our pain, we create space for healing, not just for ourselves, but for everyone listening. And please, subscribe to this channel. I'm going to keep sharing stories like this, stories of people who were told they were nothing and became everything. Stories of resilience, stories of transformation, stories of people learning to believe in themselves even when the world told them not to. Your future isn't determined by your past. Your worth isn't determined by who rejected you. You're the author of your own story, and the best chapters are still ahead of you. I believe in you, even if no one else does right now, and I promise you, if you keep moving forward, keep believing in yourself, the world is going to see what I see. Someone absolutely extraordinary. Thank you for watching. Thank you for letting me share my truth with you. Now go out there and build the life you deserve.